Welcome to Business Unmuted, sponsored by Virtue Motors, one of the UK's largest motor retailers. Check out its website at virtuemotors.com. I'm Graham Robb and I've owned Recognition PR for nearly 35 years. We've got more than 70 clients across multiple sectors in the UK. They have a turnover of £6 billion and employ around 30,000 staff. So we are at the front line of the business community, and it's a great place from which to discuss the economy. And in the studio today, I've got Ian Dormer, CBE, Director at Roche Engineering, who works in the power engineering sector, as well as being former National Chairman of the Institute of Directors. Down the line, we've Alice McCulloch, who's Director at Rosedene, a nursery provider with 10 settings across the Tees Valley and North Yorkshire. And joining us all the way from the USA is Chelsea Newmeyer, who is a podcaster and a productivity and time management coach who specialises in working with small businesses. Thank you all for joining me. I'm going straight to you, Ian. Today in the economy was a big bit of news that caused everyone to sort of blink and say, what? And that was that inflation went up when everyone said it was going to go down. What was your take on that?
It just shows what an unpredictable world we're all in. And no business likes unpredictability. We like stability. We like to be able to predict. A lot of the contracts that we work on, we bid for 2 or 3 year contracts. We like to have a nice, stable, even playing field. We don't have that at the moment, so it is quite scary.
Yeah. Now you work in industry. It's an industrial kind of setting, engineering and so on. So pay, recruitment and stability are clearly important, because I should imagine that a lot of your clients are going to be asking for long-term commitments.
They are. And that's something that we like, because that helps us invest and develop and grow the business. But equally, I've got a huge amount of sympathy for the Bank of England in terms of its interest rate decision this week. Because, of course, the sort of tools that they have to control the economy don't turn them on and off. They can have many, many months of time lag. So, of course, with all these sort of unpredictable factors within the market, we're not going to be in a stable environment probably for many months to come. So we're all in the same boat.
Do you know, my sympathy with the Bank of England is muted. And I tell you why. We run in the northeast and in Yorkshire, in association with an accountancy firm, a shadow MPC. And smaller businesses like my own are represented on this shadow monetary policy committee. And way back in May 2021, we were saying the Bank of England should have put interest rates up because we could see inflation. The Bank of England sat on its hands and the MPC did nothing. And now it's playing catch up. And the same is true of the Fed. In America, it was too little, too late on interest rates, and now we've got this big inflation problem, and inflation interest rates going up and up.
So, what do you think the shadow MPC says we should be doing now? Then?
Well,
that's the big question.
Well, the first thing is, I think my view, and I wonder what your view. If you were on the real MPC tomorrow, would you, with today's news about inflation, vote to put it up? I think I might. What would you do?
I probably would, but only by a small amount.
Oh yeah, fraction.
The trouble is we have at the minute, of course, there's a lot of businesses are now starting to sweat because they've been so used to very low interest rates for so long that anybody that's carrying debt, I mean, I've always been extraordinarily cautious. Sometimes I probably wish I had stretched myself a little bit more, taken on debts that could grow. But now I'm thinking, no, I'm rather happy because I'm not affected by the, in fact, actually, I
got savings probably,
yeah, exactly. We're gaining money from it. But at the end of the day, there are some businesses out there, and I don't want my suppliers to go under. I don't want any other businesses to go under just because they can't afford their debt repayments. So it is a scary time. I like stability. That's what I really like.
But inflation is the worst. Yep. It's the cruel, quiet thief. It'll steal your savings. It'll destroy your jobs. So we can't really ignore that, can we?
Do you know what? We had a board meeting just last week where we actually tried to look at our pay rises, and we thought we'd got it bottomed out. We could see that inflation was coming down. We thought we'd had that very difficult line between making sure that we satisfied all of our staff's needs, because they do have needs. They need to pay their bills, but at the same time not give such a high pay rise that we're going to be uncompetitive. It's a delicate balance.
Yeah.
I thought we'd hit it right with all of the media frenzy around this.
Yeah.
Now all of a sudden I'm thinking, have we?
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. It is a very difficult measure to have. I'm facing it myself in a smaller business than yours. Tell me one more thing before we move on to our next guest. Do you think, I'll state this as my view, see if you agree, the Bank of England's Monetary Policy Committee is made up of a group of experts, nothing wrong with being an expert, but they're drawn from a pool of people who don't really experience the economy in the same way as you and I do. Here we are, northern business people. It's economists from the big world banks. It's academics. It's bankers in central banking. Do they need just maybe a noise or voice off?
Do you know, I'm gonna sit back and say, there's one old saying that I love about this, is that they said that economists were invented to make weather forecasters look good.
Yes.
And that, I think, is the challenge. It is not easy predicting the economy because there are so many conflicting factors coming into the equation. So no, I have sympathy for them. It's not easy.
Okay. Well, Ian, stay there. We'll come to the end of the discussion. I want to introduce our guests. And the next is Chelsea Newmeyer. Chelsea, you're watching us from America, and you just heard Ian talking about pay. And you've heard me talking about the economy in Britain. Now, we're not whinging because it's not that bad. Inflation wouldn't be going up if the economy was weak, would it? But the key to this issue for businesses, particularly small businesses, is surely productivity. You're a productivity specialist. Do you see that there's more demand for more productivity from business owners?
Yeah, I think especially in the small business world, we're all already trying to do more with less. And so as what I'm seeing again from the online space and what I'm hearing from clients is really thinking about how they can get the resources that they need, start outsourcing, getting the help that they need with all of the costs, with inflation happening, with costs increasing.
So your clients and the people you advise do tend to be in the smaller business space. Are there any immediate things that businesses should encourage both their owners and their staff to look at to make sure that those productivity gains are wrapped up? The easy, low-hanging fruit, what is it?
So I have built my business, and when I work with all of my clients, it's really built under the foundation of productivity as personal. And so one of the benefits of having hybrid or remote work situations is that it allows workers to create an environment that best supports their personal productivity, how they like to work, the structures that they need to feel confident and comfortable and trusted in their job. So for business owners, it's really important to think about how they can support their employees, how they can provide them with a really high value experience, how they can give them the trust and the tools that they need to get the work done at a pace and at a cadence that makes sense for them, that's going to work best for them, while obviously having the high enough output and hitting the goals that they need to in the business.
You talked about trust and so on. In measuring people's productivity, or people being allowed to measure their own productivity, are we the best judge of it? Or do we get into bad habits? I mean, I think about my own business life, which is, I suppose, white collar. It's a know-how kind of business, PR and so on. I quite often rely on my own to-do lists. And do I triage my to-do list well enough? Do I make my to-do list contemporary enough? What kind of things do you advise on that?
Sure. So again, I mostly work with people who are entrepreneurs or solo entrepreneurs. So you're your own boss, which is a whole other challenge when it comes to productivity, because you don't have someone looking over your shoulder. If something doesn't get done, you're the only person who's really going to see the impact of that. So it's important to kind of differentiate the two. If you are a small business owner, again, it's really making sure that your employees understand what are the metrics, what are the goals and expectations that they have every day, every week, but then giving them the time and space to figure out how to get there themselves, how to get those goals done themselves. When it comes to personal productivity, I think it's really about making sure that whatever is on that top list, your priorities are helping you reach your goals. And that sounds very quip and that sounds very kind of cliche to say, but at the end of the day, we need to be making money. And so really making sure that we're focusing on those money-making activities as a top priority is going to make the most impact in your business.
By the way, on my to-do list, I always try and do the hard stuff first. The easy stuff it's tempting to say, well, I've got to phone that. If phoning Ian was on my to-do list, then it would be tempting to phone him first because we're old friends and it'd be great. But actually, it wouldn't be hard, and perhaps the hard things need to be done first.
Yeah, there's two approaches I like to talk about when I talk about productivity, and there's either that eat the frog approach, right? That do that hard thing first and get that off your list, get it done right away, first thing. Or I'm more of a ramp up kind of person. I'm not a morning person actually. So I like to have a few of those easier or more enjoyable tasks. I said about an hour, give myself a little bit of a ramp up time. But again, this is all coming back to productivity is personal. So making sure that you recognize what's going to work best for you and then building your schedule and your to-do list accordingly.
Now, I've noticed in my own working life, particularly I quite often deal with the senior management of larger organizations, and it's nuanced stuff I'm doing. And I find that they want to have those conversations at either end of the day. So I end up dealing with conversations with senior leaders either at 7 in the morning or at 9 at night. Now, I don't mind that personally. I'm used to it. But if you were saying to a staff in an environment I'm in that you should do that can quite often great. But sometimes your productivity has to fit in with your customers, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And so, again, I work mostly with online business owners, with small business owners, and kind of the benefit of that is we get to decide what that looks like, right? We get to decide clients that are going to also match our cadence and the deadlines that we set for ourselves. If you're in a situation like yours where your time isn't necessarily your own, right? You do have to report up into someone else. I think it's really just about establishing that culture within the team and within the office, right? If your boss sends you an email at 9 o'clock at night, are you expected to respond right away? And or do you have a 24-hour turnaround time? And so making sure that when you're talking with your staff or with your team, just being really clear about what those communication expectations are so that you don't have a stressed, anxious team that feels like they need to be on their toes all the time, that feels like they need to respond at any given moment.
That's very helpful. Now, tell me about some of the software that you tend to use or recommend for helping time management or productivity management.
Sure. So this is where I'm a very old school kind of person. I actually I predominantly use paper and pen.
But I'm so glad to hear that. No, let's take a pause.
We're of that age.
We're all, yeah, but I'm not that because of that age. I actually like the idea of a paper. I think that's fantastic. To hear you say that, I'm brilliant. I've got a guru from America agrees with that. That's brilliant.
So again, for me, I just come back to that phrase of what's going to work best for you.
Yeah.
And I've tried so many times to set up digital time management and productivity tools. There are some incredible options out there. Asana, ClickUp, Monday. Yeah. These are big names that are incredibly powerful tools. And I have set them all up and then immediately abandoned them because I look just like paper and pen.
I agree with you. In fact, I'm looking in the control room of our studio here, and there's one of my guys who has to work on Asana for one of our clients, and I think he was slightly nodding on that. We also, in our business, even though all of our material is computerized and digitized, I still have whiteboards around the office so we can see where the jobs are. It might be a bit old-fashioned, and sometimes I feel as though I'm out of the arc, but it's nice to hear it. The issue of productivity I've raised and Ian has raised as an actual issue. You're a productivity coach. Do you see this as rearing its head in American business? Is productivity on the top tier of business concerns?
So I think it really comes down to, again, making sure that whatever system a team builds can support the goals of the organization and also the team that's being built, right? And going back to how you can best support that team. I don't see it as a huge concern right now. Again, when I'm talking with my clients, I think what they're thinking the most about is really, again, making sure that it's that personalized systems and structures that they can create for themselves. And so when we're in this like hybrid remote options, many cities are showing that productivity increases when people are allowed to work from home, when they're allowed to work without distractions in an environment that's comfortable for them and at times that work best for them. Kind of going back to that, are you a morning person or a night person, right? Are you allowed to have that flexibility in your day?
Chelsea, one thing I did want to ask you, because I think our viewers would be quite interested in this, you are demonstrating the validity of this hybrid model because you are working from home, but you're working from somewhere that's very remote. I'll just take a moment for you can tell people why you're there and how you actually accomplish your tasks by being there.
Sure. So my husband's in the Navy, and so we are currently stationed in Guantanamo Bay Naval Base in Cuba. It's been an absolutely incredible experience, although I will say that unfortunately we don't get to actually visit the country very much. We're pretty isolated on our base, but it's still absolutely beautiful here. And I am so grateful for the hybrid and remote working options now, because I actually also work as a nonprofit consultant as a contractor, and I'm able to serve all of those clients remotely as well. And so being able to work with people all over the country and all over the world is so incredibly powerful and has taken some practice, but that's how I support my clients as well.
Chelsea, I'm going to leave with this interview by just asking you to tell us the product that you could offer to a small business in the UK. How would they work with you?
Sure. So I offer coaching for individuals and for teams. And again, it's coming back to that. We don't often dedicate time to thinking about how we spend our time. So when you work with someone like me, you're thinking about it and being incredibly intentional about how we're spending every minute of the day.
All right. Well, just for people to remember, it's Chelsea Newmeyer. I looked you up on the internet. I instantly found videos of you by Googling you. So that certainly shows that you're right up there with that wonderful name. And I hope you do get some work from the UK. Thank you. We'll come back to you in a moment. Now, our next guest is Alice McCulloch. Now, Alice knows Rishi Sunak. There's Rishi Sunak visiting her business premises in our local paper in the northeast of England, because Alex is a director of Rosedene Nurseries with 10 settings across the north of England. Alice, thank you for joining us. Last week in the UK budget, the government introduced new childcare arrangements that are going to be phased in with a view to getting working people back into the workplace sooner after the birth of a child than it's otherwise possible. The idea would be in due course, at aged 9 months, the government will pay for 30 hours free childcare so that someone can go back into the workplace. What was your view on that policy announcement?
Well, Graham, the headline announcement from the government was this huge injection of £4 billion into the sector. And like you said, getting working parents back to work quicker by offering this 30 hours free childcare. So we have to recognise that it is a major childcare policy reform and one that we'd all been crying out for a long time. However, without sounding like an ungrateful child, there's a lot of problems with the reform set out by the Chancellor. And it's really important to understand the context of the early years sector at the moment, which is in a crisis. And it's facing some of the biggest challenges that we've seen for decades. We've seen record numbers of early years settings close in 2021 to 22, actually 5,000 nursery providers closed. And we're heavily underfunded by the government already. And consequently, we're in a recruitment and a retention crisis. And the fundamental problem is that the funding just doesn't add up at all. The government already offers what it calls free childcare for 2, 3 and 4 year olds. The subsidy that it gives us as childcare providers just doesn't cover the costs. And I can give you an example of what's happened this year with our business. The government funding that we receive per child is actually £2 short per hour for the cost that it costs us as a provider to deliver that care. And obviously, as we've discussed, inflation has gone up 10%, wage increase has gone up 10%, and the government funded money went up 2% that it was giving us for that childcare per hour. And now with the announcement that Jeremy Hunt gave us this week, more funded places for parents, it doesn't come with the adequate funding, that's needed to deliver that care. So it's going to simply push up the demand without increasing the supply or the infrastructure in place to deliver that care.
Now, there is a slight pushback on this point, which is that as well as the government offering the parents the free childcare, the government has offered the sector two other things. First, a £500 effectively tax credit that will allow you to attract people into the sector and give them a £500 golden hello. And the second, to change the regulations so that the number of children cared for was 5 to 1 instead of 4 to 1. Do those not make any difference to your cost base?
So in terms of the point on the childcare ratios, this was actually something that was floated last year, and the sector, while kind of pulled together and actually fully opposed the ratio relaxation, because
except
all
in Scotland, where it already happens.
Say again, sorry, Graham.
But not in Scotland, because Scotland already has that ratio, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. It does. But I mean, I think in reality, you. So what it is you'll have two members of the team looking after 10 two-year-olds, and if you try to look after 10 two-year-olds, one of those will be changing nappies most of the time, and that gives one person the opportunity to try and look after 9 two-year-olds, and all it's going to do is dilute the quality of the education that we provide. And at Rosedene, we personally are not going to support the ratios. They are optional. It is an attempt to reduce the wage costs, but it's just simply not going to deliver the support. With COVID, we've seen a huge amount of children needing additional support, needing one-to-one care. And, this is just simply not a step forward in the education that we should be providing to the future of our society.
What about the £500 introductory grant, the golden hello?
So I think that's definitely going to support, people that are on universal credit, and that funding's increased by 50%. So this is something that has been a big ask, and we were very grateful for that, and it's definitely going to help support getting parents back into work. So yes, I think there are some positive elements, and like we said, there's been a huge kind of transformation in the sector, but because we're already in such a mess, we are going to need better funding for that funded childcare in order to deliver on these promises.
Okay, Alice, I think we've heard that point now loud and clear, well delivered, but I also want to reinforce to people viewing that your nursery school provider is exemplary. You are busy, you're full, you're the first choice for many parents. In fact, during the lockdown, you delivered in the northeast of England childcare for the essential workers, didn't you?
Yes, we did, and it seems like a long time ago now.
3 years. 3 years tomorrow.
Wow.
The 23rd. 3 years tomorrow. The lockdown.
Yeah, and we're incredibly proud of the team. That we all still have. Rosedene, we're lucky that we're a long-standing, strong family business, and during COVID, we were able to set up hubs throughout the 4 local authority areas that we operate, and we offered 24-hour childcare. And we were able to support our families, we were able to support our employees, and we've got a strong team in place to help ride these peaks and troughs that we're going through, and we've come out stronger on the other side. So we're really lucky, and we're fully aware that there's more tough times ahead, but hopefully we're in a good place to ride the storm again.
Just to conclude, and maybe this is part, I don't know the answer to this question, it might be positive, might not be. Although you've had some, quite strident criticism of the implementation of this scheme, and you welcome the scheme generally, do you think that you will be participating in it, albeit you may not be offering as many places as the government may wish?
I think we're still waiting for answers on how the funding is going to be shared out. We're not going to see it fully materialise until 2025. So it's going to be in staged approaches. We're constantly monitoring and adapting, the way that we're operating. It's difficult to drive efficiencies in childcare because of the ratios, and it simply just kind of dilutes the quality of care. But I think, we obviously do want to support and as many parents as possible and offer these funded places, but we do also rely on private care to keep the business intact.
Yes, that 31st hour will be a private hour, won't it? All right, Alice, thank you. Just let me wrap up by going back to Ian and to Chelsea. By the way, Chelsea, the idea of free nursery care for preschool children, does that happen anywhere in the US?
No, I don't honestly quite know the answer. I don't have children yet.
Right.
But I know that it's something that I talk often with about my colleagues and coworkers and others in this space, just because it's unaffordable for most families. And so trying to come up with solutions to that is a really, really important topic.
But childcare clearly is an issue across the Western world to get
Absolutely.
participation in the workforce at an early stage.
Mm-hmm.
Ian,
Yes, absolutely.
the one thing that strikes me, you and I have been in business a long time, and when we were starting in business, the government's funding of education was actually biased towards the older age. You were still getting people being funded entirely to go to university, together with maintenance grants when I started. That's all, well, not all, but quite a lot of it has gone. The university students don't get that kind of support now, and it's moved down towards where Alice is operating. Nursery, it strikes me that's probably the better use of the resource.
I was going to say, at the end of the day, if you don't get your saplings sorted and right and get that capacity to, that lust to learn and to develop, then you're not going to grow as many decent plants, are you? So that's so important. I mean, early stage education is absolutely, completely and utterly underappreciated, I think, in terms of what we do in our world.
Well, on that very convivial note, because we all agree on that, I think we'll wrap it up. Chelsea, Alice, Ian, thank you for joining me. Thank you for joining me on Business Unmuted. Join us again next week. By the way, in a few weeks' time, when we approach our 100th episode, we're going to be renaming the programme away from Business Unmuted to Northern Business Podcast. Watch this space. Take care.